before we had our last class on Thursday before Spring Fest, so we were discussing the Indian Sign Language, English to Indian Sign Language machine translation. And just a quick recap, we saw that how we parse a sentence in English to identify the different grammatical and syntactical structure like part of speeches, the relation of different part of speeches with the other words and phrases in the sentence. And then we have some rules. So this was rule-based translation system. Nowadays, as deep learning has come, there are some efforts to develop deep learning based translation systems for uh, uh, sign language, just like we are having these neural machine translations for other spoken languages. But this is easy to comprehend for the who are knowing it for the first time. So we have certain rules. So based on the rules, we develop the what will be the corresponding sign language, how can I say, like sign language syntactic structure for an English sentence. Okay. So till this part we had completed. So now this is an overall uh, framework of the ISL generation. So after we come up with what will be the sign language token representation for an English sentence, we need to actually generate the sign language, right? So don't get worried about this picture. So let us simplify it. So basically, in the rule-based or statistical translation systems, we have a bilingual dictionary that it is as in our dictionary, say like with the English to Hindi dictionary, you have a bilingual mapping, two languages. So similar dictionary. And when we tokenize the text, we search the gloss in the dictionary. Again, gloss is a term for similar meaning words in the dictionary. Okay. Uh, like the meaning of the word. Now, if the gloss is found in the sign language dictionary, we come up with the sign language representation. Now, in some cases, what happens that the word that I am searching for, I do not have any entry in the sign language dictionary for the word. So for that, I go to another database called WordNet. Now, WordNet has nothing to do with sign language. So WordNet is a database of the English language. What WordNet provide group of synonyms. Say if I am having the word beauty. Now, this beauty, I do not have any entry in my bilingual dictionary. So then I go to WordNet and WordNet says, okay, one synonym of beauty can be pretty. Then I come back and see, okay, I have pretty in my bilingual dictionary. So the same sign representation for pretty, I can now use for beauty. Although they may not be exactly the same, but it will do the work like we do in translation. Like we try to find the most similar or more appropriate word from one language to another. So then this, if we find the synonym and we search again the sign language representation for the synonym. Now what happens? Say in some cases the WordNet also cannot give you the synonym. Take for example this one. This synonym exists for a concept, right? But there is no synonym of IIT KGP. So in that case, also in English, we also say it IIT KGP. That means actually the alphabetic representation because that is an abbreviation. So for that, for sign language, they are all, that means all the signs for I, T, G, and P will be done. So in this way, from tokenized text in sign language is generated. Okay. And then one important component is this sign language generation. As you can see, this bilingual ISL dictionary, because the whole generation stands we build this we have a group of sign language experts and another group of sign language or any one of the groups. Okay. It is just like we are all the English, but there are trained linguists who know the grammar and the language specificity of English better than us. Okay. So how do we come up with this lexicon? Basically, we have an input word or phrase or sentence. So this part is simple, like this part is common for all language parsing, all natural language. You type to identify the conceptual mapping of the different words and phrases. These are same. And these are some video recording unit. If you have, this is especially for sign language to have the like this of the input different words. But for the typing, we are ignoring this. Let us stay at the wholly the textual representation level because sign generation is another part. So after that, we have something called an Hamnosis editor. Just give me a moment, okay?
Ma'am, you are on mute.
Yes, hi. No, I muted myself. I one call came. That's why. Thank you anyway for pointing that. Okay. So basically, the main focus component is this. This is called the Hamnosis the editor. So, like I was saying, say in English, English is a spoken language, but we have a script to kind of write it down. Like think it as a notation system for the time being. So basically, it conveys that what you need to speak out. Say I give you two sentences written down in a page and I hand it over to you. So from the alphabets and you have the understanding how it alphabets is pronounced, how a word is pronounced, and you can speak it out. So hamnosis is kind of like that, but for sign language. So whenever we are saying that say at this part that this is a sign representation, this will be a finger spelling. So in at every stage it may not be possible that like at every stage whenever we give someone instruction it may not be possible to direct that verbally. It is also not possible in sign language to also generate it or to always convey like by gesture, especially in a machine translation system. So for that, there is this Hamnosis notation. This notation system, so basically when the sign is generated, it is represented say in the textual term or in the transcribed format as a system of symbols and notations, just like our scripts. And then either a person who is a sign language user can see the notation and understand what kind of sign gesture the notation is conveying. So basically the person is not communicating with the English script. The person is communicating with actually the sign language, like they are kind of quote unquote reading the sign language notations and understand that okay, this is the sign language that is getting conveyed. Second thing is that in the sign language generation system, whether it is machine translation or whether you have a pre-built sign language lexicon, this Hamnosis notation is a pretty standardized notation. So it, like if you have an observed sign language generation system, it will kind of it kind of act as, you know, just like say for example, if you have a text to speech, like the one system that will convert the text written to speech, like it will speak aloud. We have this kind of applications. Okay, we have this kind of application in, you can see even the news sites, in the blog sites. So does this speech system always know how to pronounce each and every word beforehand? No, it is built on certain rules, that okay, if this is an alphabet, has a possible spelling like this, so that is something we call the letter to sound mapping. Then from alphabet it goes to words, then it needs to take into account the exception of the rule, like pneumonia, like psychology, okay, or confusing spelling, like you know, ch cat, ch chalk, so like this things, and hat. So some words, some alphabets which can have multiple pronunciations based on the context. Similarly, in language generation system, especially if I am having some animation, it is not always possible to kind of, you know, build animations for all the possible sign language output. Okay, because it is a language, it has infinite possibilities. So this Hamnosis notation serves as like there is a mapping between the Hamnosis notation and the corresponding sign language manual signs or non-manual signs. Just like a text to speech generates the speech output based on reading aloud individual the words, this Hamnosis system, based on the Hamnosis notation also, this sign language is generated, or the actual animated example is generated. Okay, we will see what is Hamnosis. So with this Hamnosis editor, we have the sign language, say for example, one repository for Indian sign language, one sign language, and then the user can search and can retrieve signs for sentences any language. Let us go to the Hamnosis notation. Hamnosis stands for Hamburg Sign Language Notation System. Ham, no, sis. Okay, because sign language does not have any written form. So to define a sign, we need a notation, the phonetic transcription. So based on the phones or based on the sounds of the words, so there are, and just like say English, we write with a script. There are some way to write a sentence, right? Or even for not in English, better example will be the Indian languages. Say in all of the mother tongues that we have, be it Bangla, Hindi, Tamil, Punjabi, anything, our scripts are very non-linear, right? We have the vowel diacritic like the matras, we have the consonant conjuncts like the juktakshars. Huh? We have this ra ki matra, ja ki matra, which are not only a, e, these matras, right? So basically, we have a also a defined way that how will I write. Okay, so there are two ways when say like this say when how the consonants are attached with each other in a juxtaposure, which is the dominant consonant, huh? and in what which is the dominant matra. So in this way, right? So in hymnosis also we have some parameters that how will we define a sign. So the first thing is that it will be based on the dominant hand shape. Like in a sign, as we have seen, there can be, the one hand, two hand and facial gesture, hand, face and body, the hands can move, but one dominant hand shape will are is generally present. Then the stretched fingers, like how the finger and the palm of the dominant hand is positioned with respect to the body and its orientation. And if there is any movement like two hand, repeated movements, circular or straight movements, and if there is any facial expression. So these are the components of an hypnosis notation system. Say if my index finger is stretched like this, in hypnosis, the symbol is this. If my fingers are extended and stretched ahead, this is a symbol. If my palm is oriented left of my dominant hand, then this is a symbol. If my this shows the location of my shoulder height, like this black fill up. This shows like whether my hands are fully stretched out. This is for hand movement ahead of me. This is for hand movement right of me. Okay, and these are some of the components. Like yes, last year we saw that for sign language, the space around the signer's body is divided into three vertical components, three horizontal components, and three lateral components, right, for different signs. So these are also say this part, if it is on head, it is called R. If it is here, it is defined as Q. This is bracket, this is this symbol, and this is defined as this symbol. Okay. Why it has come up with like this kind of notation, I don't know, but this is the standard notation. So, for example, a sign of a woman is like this. So, you take basically you take your dominant hand and with the index finger you touch this your this right side of your nose. Okay. So, this will be a corresponding hypnosis representation of the sign of a woman. This shows the hand shape. As you can see, like this index finger stretch sign is this. So it is stretched, and how the other fingers are. This is the extended finger orientation, which side index finger is positioning. This is the sign for the palm orientation, and this is sign for the location of my hand placement. Okay, that is how the sign language is represented in the hypnosis notation system. I know it all seems a bit cryptic, but just think like you are learning a script for a new language. So when you learn a new language, how do you learn the script? For this sound, for this character. Basically, the characters means what? Key. We have learned like A is a. A looks like this, right? So in the same way, if you see this hypnosis notation also kind of like transcribe sign language. So another thing is that always the hypnosis transcription is not trivial, because this may be a simple example, but as we have seen that sign language is a full-fledged language and has its own beauty and complexity. So the user who actually transcribe the hypnosis for sign languages must be an expert, and they need to remember like all the hypnosis symbols and their meaning. So it is difficult than our standard alphabetic system because they generally we don't associate meaning with the character or actions. But things like a language like Chinese, I don't know, maybe Chinese is an inappropriate word. The languages are Mandarin and all. But in that, so basically there a symbol represents a syllable of the concept. So everyone needs to remember the meaning of all the symbols. Okay. So in those languages there can be as much as 10,000 unique symbols. So uh, this is an example of the Indian Sign Language Hamnosis System Editor. So what it does is that given a sign, so at that time we did not have these beautiful animations, and so this was mostly black and white pictures taken from a large sign language book, and photos digitized. And so basically the idea is like this, that for hamnosis what do we need? Hand shape, hand orientation, hand location, hand movement, and non-manual gesture. So this editor give each of the options. So it says like, tell us about the hand shape. So when the user select a hand shape, say like flat hand. So then it asks for the hand orientation. Then asks for the hand location. Then it asks for the hand movement, and then it asks for the non-manual gesture. So from all the information, it generates a sign language. See, this is one of the finger or palm orientation. What do you want to do? This, if there is any in between symbols or not. Then tell us about the location of the symbol, where in the, even if someone says above the head, where in actually in above the head, because all these things have like can mean different signs based on different placement. These are the type of movement, that is whether you have straight, whether you have repeated once, repeated several times, repeated with switch in dominance, okay, or curved movement. So actually, where is the hamnosis? So based on all these, the system will give an hamnosis notation. So the hamnosis notation, the picture is not shown here, but basically it is written with the XML code. Okay. So based on all the hand shapes, the hamnosis file is generated for a particular English symbol, for a particular hand gesture. So evaluation, I will not go into it. So any question till now? Any questions? Okay. Uh, then I am stopping the slide share for a moment. So with this, we come to the end of our hearing impairment lecture, and we will start a new topic. I'm just switching off the screen share for a moment. Oh, okay. So the next topic that we will start is on cerebral palsy, and all the discussions on the assignments and offline tests and syllabus and reading materials, we will do it tomorrow. Okay. So to start cerebral palsy, I want to start with two videos. So the first one, we will not see the 25 minutes documentary film. It is we only see a first couple of minutes. So the name of this documentary is the I Am Jija, as you can see. So this is based on the life of Jija Ghosh, who is a very reputed disability activist and herself a person with cerebral palsy. And this documentary captures like how the challenges she faces in her day-to-day life, the supports or the fights that persons with disabilities still need to do. So I will give you the link, watch it at your spare time or after the semester, whenever you like. This is one of the very few documentaries made in India on lives of persons with disabilities, and this won the national award for uh, in, in the documentary mm, ca- category. Okay, what happened? Wait a minute. Just a second. Okay, just a second. Just a second. Very sorry, my server crashed. Actually, the Safari crashed. Actually, so I hope it will be better. When I was growing up, there was no legal permission. In 1995, the first legislation on disability came up. Rights of persons with disabilities Act, which provided for education, rehabilitation, employment for people with disabilities. However, problem was the implementation of the Act. In 20 years, we find
very little work has been done. Cerebral palsy is a condition caused due to brain damage before birth, during birth, or up to 5 years of birth. When I was in the 70s, even many doctors were not familiar with this condition. Diwali in June, Mama, long live March, the doctor only got burden. Family damage questions. Origin of the life. So it had to be cesarean. And the doctor was overconfident, and due to lack of oxygen, my brain cells were damaged. আমার বাবা মা বা আমার দিদিরা family members তারা কখনো আমাকে বুঝতে দেন যে আমি আলাদা বা আমার কোনো ডিসেবিলিটি আছে।
Okay, so you can watch this at your uh, convenient time. So this was just to give an idea that how actually lives of persons with disabilities are, and how the inadequate our structure of the inclusion is, and all the people that you saw, especially at the first couple of minutes in the videos, they are not intellectually, there is no intellectual disability or what we call mental retardedness, because we generally make fun of these people, we point them out, and we they use these kinds of terms, retarded, and all very very conveniently for jokes, for sarcasm, etc., right? But the thing is that that there is nothing in the looks, you just can, from seeing a person you just can tell it, because there are full facial deformity due to the facial muscle disability, in the facial muscle impairment, in the facial muscle impairment the muscles of the hands and legs, and um, other like non-voluntary movements, spasticity, things like that. So it may seem that these people, and I am using these terms very consciously, like quote unquote, these people are not what we generally see as, like in our friend circle, in our communities, in our social circle. So we kind of feel the need to tag them, but it should not be the case. So coming from Jija, so let us see what cerebral palsy is. So actually, I had the video open, and due to this multiple video opening, my Safari crashed. So let me bring it up once again. Don't go into my YouTube recommendations. These are used by many people, so they say absolutely nothing about me. Okay. Okay. So there can be many videos. So These are many videos on cerebral palsy available in TED, in YouTube, in other public forums. So I'm just this video I found it to be very comprehensive. So therefore I picked it up.
It's pretty well established that your brain's really important. It's like if your body was a computer, your brain's the mainframe. It controls everything, whether you're aware of it or not. Cerebral palsy means brain disease causing paralysis. So essentially, cerebral palsy refers to damage to the brain that causes loss of muscle control. Like, for example, if the cerebellum was damaged, patients might have issues with fine motor skills, like writing or typing. That being said, though, cerebral palsy is a broad umbrella term to basically cover a wide variety of issues, since ultimately the muscles affected and severity depends on which part of the mainframe's been affected, right? Cerebral palsy is considered a neurodevelopmental disease, meaning that something happens to an area in the brain during its initial development, which is an extremely sensitive period. If that area doesn't develop right, then it can't carry out whatever function it's supposed to control. Now, what's this vague something that can happen, though? Well, I said something because there's such a wide variety of causes. The majority of cerebral palsy cases are thought to happen before birth or prenatally, which typically means the underlying cause is really hard to pin down. Exposure to radiation or infection during fetal development can cause cerebral palsy. Hypoxia to the developing fetus has been linked as well. In this case, the developing brain doesn't get enough oxygen, potentially from problems like the placenta not being able to supply enough oxygen and nutrients. Cerebral palsy doesn't have to happen prenatally, though. And some postnatal cases are things like head trauma, or again, an infection, or a period of oxygen deprivation. Although most cases are likely due to some trauma or injury, a very small proportion of cases are due to a genetic mutation. Even though this brain damage or injury or abnormality is permanent, one super important point to remember about cerebral palsy is that it doesn't get worse over time. And for that reason, it's considered a non-progressive disease. Cerebral palsy is classified by the type of muscle movements that result from the brain injury and how that affects what activities the patient can perform. The first type is called spastic cerebral palsy, which accounts for about 70% of cases, and is characterized by having really tight or stiff muscles, which can make the patient's movements seem jerky. This tightness results from a lesion in the upper motor neurons. So with a lesion, which just means some kind of abnormality, the ability of some of these neurons to receive GABA might be impaired. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter. So if nerve impulses can't be inhibited, which is a double negative, then those nerves are basically overexcited, leading to hypertonia, which is an abnormal increase in muscle activity. Basically like if the muscles were constantly flexed. This is why some people with spastic cerebral palsy have a scissor gait. Think about how difficult it'd be to walk when your adductor muscles were always partly flexed, which causes your knees and your thighs to constantly touch. Similarly, some patients have a toe walk because their calves are always flexed, which pulls the Achilles tendon up and causes someone to go up on their toes. A second type of cerebral palsy is athetoid or dyskinetic cerebral palsy, and this one involves damage or injury to the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is this structure here which essentially helps us initiate and prevent certain movements. If the basal ganglia becomes damaged, patients can lose the ability to prevent movements, and therefore they can have involuntary movements, meaning out of their control. So dyskinetic cerebral palsy is characterized by dystonia and or chorea. Dystonia is random, slow, and uncontrolled movements in the limbs and trunk. Chorea is random dance-like movements, since the small, uncontrolled movements seem to move from muscle to muscle. Finally, there's ataxic cerebral palsy. Taxis refers to an order or arrangement, so ataxic essentially means without order, which is in reference to patients with this type being shaky or uncoordinated. And this is caused by damage to the cerebellum. The cerebellum helps us with coordination in fine or precise movements. These patients often have clumsy or unstable movements and poor balance when doing things like walking or picking something up. Although different from patient to patient, many patients with muscle control issues have other symptoms as well. Patients often experience pain from tightened muscles or abnormal posture and stiff joints. Also, abnormal movements might make it difficult to sleep at night, and patients can develop sleep disorders. Even eating can become difficult as well, which can range from the preparation of food to the action of chewing and swallowing the food. Other brain-related issues are also associated, like difficulties with speaking and communication, vision problems, and learning disabilities. Since cerebral palsy involves a permanent abnormality to the brain structure, it's not curable. But that doesn't mean it's not treatable. Treatment for cerebral palsy usually involves a multidisciplinary approach, pulling from a number of clinical specialties like neurologists, rehabilitation specialists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and others, hopefully to find a unique approach for each patient, ultimately improving their quality of life. Physical therapy can be used to build strength and improve walking ability, along with stretching to reduce contracture, which is a permanent shortening of muscle tissue from being hypertonic or contracted for so long. Sometimes muscle relaxants are given or botulinum toxin is injected into certain muscles to reduce hypertonicity and relax the muscles, which can both help reduce pain associated with hypertonus and also help fit patients with specific orthotic braces. Sometimes surgery might also be performed to help with a variety of issues, like loosening tight muscles, straightening out bones that have been subject to abnormal muscle forces over time, and cutting certain nerves to reduce their associated movements or spasms. Thanks for watching. You can help support us by donating on Patreon or Cerebral Palsy.
Okay, so thanks for watching too from my side. I just want to, so I picked this video up because it shows in a comprehensive manner the different types of cerebral palsy like spasticity, dystonia, and how brain is affected in cerebral palsy and the prenatal and the postnatal causes. So most of the time cerebral palsy is, as Jija said, like it is due to a wrong delivery during the birth, or the sufficient oxygen not reaching to a child's brain, or the mother getting not enough nutrition, or may have incurred some physical harm during pregnancy in prenatal cases. So cerebral palsy can occur due to different kind of accidents in prenatal and the postnatal stage, but those are not the only reason, because those are the reasons that we know, but we do not know every one of the reasons that why it has and how it has exactly occurred. Okay, we know that what parts of our brain is affected and what how that is manifested in our movements, in our hear and speak ability, okay, and all those things. So cerebral palsy is actually can be diagnosed as early as I guess like so as early as like 3 months after a child is born. So the doctors, they can, from the pose of the child sleeping or when the child is awake, from the cry, they can identify actually lots of the lots of disabilities like hearing impairment or speech impairment can be identified very early also in the in an infant. So the thing is that if it can be identified earlier, especially for cerebral palsy, and in many cases, if adequate physical therapy is provided, like this like we do in our physiotherapy, so the child can regain some of the muscle movements or to a level where he or she will be able to independently do the movements or the muscle activities, muscular activities. But in this video, what I wanted to mention actually is, as no video is perfect, I have seen that there are multiple times it has mentioned that a disease and treatment and cure and things like this, but which is not the case. It is a developmental disorder, a developmental disability. So it is not a disease. Disease means you buy a treatment, you can cure it, like, or even if you cannot cure, but the idea is to find a cure for the disease, like corona. The idea is to find a cure for the disease, but cerebral palsy is a disability. So as we have discussed, it is not a disease. So of course some parts of the brain get affected, and for that some muscle movements or some kind of activities that we generally do, not normally do, generally do, is difficult for these people. But the challenges that persons with cerebral palsy face is not because they have a disease, it's not because they have a particular fever, it's because we do not have our infrastructure accessible enough. Okay. Uh, so let's just start with some. I know we are almost at the end of the class. I will just take 2 minutes to show some statistics on cerebral palsy, and then we will be done. We will discuss the technologies too. So, just for your own thinking. So, cerebral palsy, not only like they have shown this atonic dystonia of spasticity based on how the involuntary muscle movements occur, but it also differs in the parts of the body that is affected. Either all the four hands and legs are affected, which is called the quadriplegia, or one side is affected, say left hand and left leg, or two legs are affected. So these are the different, based on this the cerebral palsy is also categorized, because as you can understand, a person who has disability in two legs versus a person who has disability in two legs and two arms will uh, have very different sets of challenges, and the assistive technology will be very different developed for these two types of people. And then actually cerebral palsy is categorized also based on the gross motor skill. Gross motor skills, motors means our movements, our muscles, like the motor of our body. And gross motor skills means, say, when we walk, when we carry a ball, okay, when say when we run, when we sit, those are our gross motor skill. We type on a computer, that requires the fine motor skill at the like precision finger movements. Okay, so these gross motor skills, based on this, it is uh, categorized into 5 categories. That is called the like gross motor functions 1 to 5. So in one, as you can see this picture, actually this picture is very hazy because it was a large picture which I have put it into slide for the presentation purposes, because this was released on the World Cerebral Palsy by the day, by the organization, and it shows the comprehensive categorization and how cerebral palsy affects. So maybe if I am, let me see if I am able to send you the actual PNG of these pictures, those will be more clear, like, because if I try to zoom here, it is getting pixelated. So in the first level, the person, say this is the person with cerebral palsy, he can climb the stair without any help. In the second level, a help like the guard railing is needed to climb a staircase. At the first level, either the person is not able to walk independently with a walker, or they can use a simple wheelchair. In the fourth level, they can use an automatic or mechanized wheelchair, then, or if they are walking using a walker, they need the support of a caregiver. And the fifth, which is the like the severe, if we can use the term severe, the most severe form of cerebral palsy, and this is generally associated with spasticity and the quadriplegia, where See in this picture, if you see this head down is not because the person is sleeping or dozing off. It is because as it affects the spines and the other muscle, the person cannot sit with the head up straight. So that's why it is like this. And as you can understand, they won't be able to move the wheelchair by themselves. Even a mechanized one requires some kind of joystick control. So they need the caregiver to actually move the wheelchair for mobility itself, for any kind of muscular activity. And if you see, it seems a small headband and this is a black strap, right? So this is exactly the headband and the black strap. So to basically they need the straps to keep them fixed with the chair, because otherwise there will be lots of the involuntary movements and it becomes very painful and difficult for them to sit. So in UK, the one in every 400 persons has cerebral palsy. In US, one in each 323 children have cerebral palsy. In India, each 3 live births per thousand have cerebral palsy. That means the one in 300. And just to remember, these are the documented figures, especially for our country. These are the only documented figures. So the actual number may be uh, quite high. Okay. So thank you everyone for listening patiently. Any question?